Good morning. Let's have a look at 91224 NCEA Economic Growth paper from 2022. Today we're just going to walk through the paper top to bottom, look at any key points, any things that we need to that stand out to us, and then how maybe to tackle each question as it arises. So question 1, and I've just unredacted this part here, paraphrased it. In 2020, the New Zealand government announced a large amount of funding for shovel-ready projects. These were business projects that would be ready to start in a short period of time, so they're ready to go, shovel-ready. Explain both the shift in aggregate demand and aggregate supply. In graph 1, due to the increase in shovel-ready projects. So I'll just put the question a bit closer. Here we go. So we've got a shift in AS, shifting right, AD, also shifting right, causing Y to shift from Y to Y1. So for us, we instantly want to go to our 4 C's model, C, 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 our cause, component, curve, consequence. And then let's start with AD. So AD, of course, we're going to pull our AD from AD equation. AD equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. And so the cause of the AD shift is going to be the government spending the money on shovel-ready projects. So the cause might be the government is increasing spending on shovel-ready projects. Components, so link that explicitly to one of those 5 points, which is going to be an increase in government spending. So this is an example of government spending. Next one, curve, because G is a component of AD, and then put the equation, AD equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. An increase in G will cause an increase in AD from AD to AD1. Make sure you reference that graph. And then finally, the conclusion. We're not going to get to the conclusion yet. We're going to put it down the bottom after we talk about aggregate supply. Because our curve here is shown from both curve shifting, not just from one. So we don't want to insinuate that just the AD shift is causing the double part here. So let's look at AS. So the reason for the AS shifting is these businesses are investing in new projects, and the government's helping to fund those new investments. So the business investments is an example. Business investments is going to increase our productivity. So AS will increase to AS1, and the cause is going to be an increase in spending in businesses will increase productivity. Productivity is a component of AS. Therefore, AS will shift from AS to AS1. And then finally, a big concluding paragraph at the bottom here to say, or not big concluding, but the conclusion of all together, to say both the increase in AD and increase in AS will combine to result in a increase in growth or an increase in GDP from Y to Y1, representing economic growth. 2. There was approximately 300,000 temporary visa. In fact, I can just skip down. This is our page here, but I can skip down until it zoomed in. Approximately 300,000 temp migrants pre-COVID, and they all had to return to their home country. So for us, there's 2 shifts here. Our first one is our shift in AS going backwards, and then also a shift in AD going backwards. And then we've got a tricky, so they're both going backwards. And we can just do the same formula, C, 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 and then C, 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 and then an overall conclusion. So cause, my first cause, let's do AD first again. Less consumers, as there's 300,000 less customers in New Zealand, or 300,000 less households in New Zealand. Component, this will cause consumer spending to decrease Then next one, curve, as C is a component of aggregate demand, AD equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. A decrease in C will cause a decrease in aggregate demand, shifting AD to AD2. So we finish on we finish here on AD to AD2. And then for our second part, which is the supply, 300,000 less workers means that there is less production in our economy because there's 300,000 less people to do the jobs. This will decrease output in New Zealand or decrease production. This is shown by a decrease in aggregate supply from AS to AS2. And then so AS to AS2. And then last sentence, overall the increase in one and the decrease in one and added to the decrease in the other leads to an overall decrease in GDP from Y to Y1. Explain why the growth in the New Zealand economy may be larger due to the borders reopening and the number of temporary workers returning compared to the impact of shovel-ready government projects. And it's given us about 2/3 of a space. I've just zoomed in, so I just made it clear. It's given us 2/3 of a page for room. When we're talking about this last part, we want to kind of compare two options. We want to look at a few different factors. So here's some ideas. Might be number of people affected, number of industries affected, number of regions affected, long-term versus short-term. Is it a long-term impact? Does it have lots of flow-ons, not many flow-ons? Is it one-off payments, or is it a sustainable growth? And what we might say here is shovel-ready projects, the AD shift for shovel-ready, let's call it shovel-ready, the AD shift is one-off. And the AS shift is long run, but not large, right? So it's not going to be a huge shift in AS from just investing in a few projects, even though it's quite a lot of money. Whereas the migrant workers are going to have AD and AS are both going to increase in the short run and long run, because those workers are going to be purchasing goods straight away and for a long time, and they are going to be working and increasing output for a long time as well. So I'm going to definitely state that the migrant workers is larger because of these reasons. Of course, it tells us in the question right up here, may be larger, so we want to definitely agree with what they're asking us to talk about up in that question there. Okay, let's look at the next one, production possibility frontier. So we've got dairy farming compared to forestry, and we're asking what would happen if we move to a new combination of dairy farming and forestry. So right now we're functioning at this point A, and if we produce more dairy, we're going to move to this point up here, point B, and then show the opportunity cost. Right here is the opportunity cost. So I think I've written that below here. There's my opportunity cost. And then using graph 3, explain why there's an opportunity cost of increasing forestry output. To me, the first thing I think of when we talk about PPF is the words I want to include. So I want to talk about productive capacity. I want to talk about limited resources. I want to talk about output. And I want to talk about choice, opportunity cost, op cost, and this kind of gives me the opportunity to talk about all of these things. So I'm going to say at point A, we're already at productive capacity. So talk about where we're at, right? That's a typical theme for economics. Start where we start from the equilibrium, start from the beginning, and then tell me the flow and effects right through to the outcome. So at point A, we're at full capacity. We're using all the resources efficiently. That's a good place to put a little definition of productive capacity in there. And then say, therefore, in order to increase output of forestry, we must give up some dairy farming because we were at full capacity. So because we're at full capacity, in order to add one more unit of one, we must sacrifice another unit. So in order to add one more unit of forestry, we must give up one unit of dairy farming. The units that we give up when making that decision or making that choice is the opportunity cost. For example, if a farm has 100 acres and it's all used for dairy farming, if the farmer wants to turn some into forestry, they must give up some of their farm. They must give up 10 acres to then give to forestry. Now the dairy farm has 90 acres and the forestry has 10 acres. So the opportunity cost would be 10 acres of dairy farm. Okay, let's look at page 7, or the second part of question 2. And basically the blurb says, efforts, we want to cut carbon emissions. It says dairy farming has high emissions, forestry has low emissions, or it's more carbon neutral. It says that dairy farms produce a lower rate of return than forestry in the long run. In this section here, it says and it's kind of hinting that we want to transition from dairy into forestry, just as we looked at up here. So compare and contrast the impacts. We're literally just going to go through the bullet points. We're going to say positive, negative, positive, negative. So the impact on workers in New Zealand. The impact on workers is going to be less workers. Of course, it's going to take less hours, less manpower to run a forest than it is to run a dairy farm. So there's going to be negative impact on workers. They're going to have less hours, less job security, or perhaps lose their jobs. So that's a negative. The second thing might be, and this is maybe getting a bit more out there, is like rural towns might be a bit decimated because forestry, one man or one family or a few households can run quite a large area. So you might lose that rural town feel of a good few dairy farms in one local town. That could be another negative. A positive could be that the people involved in forestry are going to make a lot of money. They're going to get higher returns. It's going to be that the people who are dairy farming still might get higher returns or sell more as we get more of a clean green image, reducing our carbons. And then maybe lastly, again, a bit more stretch, is the quality of life might increase for workers as there's less pollution in the environments. Okay, let's skip on to future export receipts. Just during that, you want to be saying on the one hand, on the other hand, try and use those comparing and contrasting words, not just listing facts. The impact on future export receipts. So we're going to say in the long run, it's going to be better off because we're going to be selling higher value goods, and we're going to be selling more eco-friendly goods, more eco-friendly, and good girl. Okay, let's move on to impact on future exports. What this is going to look like for us is, again, positive and a negative, using those comparing words. So positive might be more green image for our exporters. Maybe the other industries are going to get a benefit from us being more carbon neutral or more eco-friendly. And we're going to get closer to our carbon requirements, which might be important for trade. And also for just consumer preferences, tastes and fashions. People want to buy more eco-friendly all the time, so if it's coming from a clean, green country, that's going to benefit all of our export receipts. On the other hand, dairy is a huge industry for New Zealand. It's really important. It makes a large percentage of our GDP. It makes a large percentage of our current exports, and we're sacrificing a lot of that by transitioning into dairy. Transitioning away from dairy into forestry, and so that might have a real impact on our export receipts, especially in the short run, before we get those returns from the forestry. Okay, let's have a look at the last question, Sleepyhead Estate. So basically in this example, they're building a new town and a new factory, and the new town has one big factory, and it has 1,100 homes being built. So there's the construction and then actually the use of those facilities and the use of that factory. And we're going to talk about the circular flow diagram. Again, when we come to circular flow, we're thinking of a few things. We're thinking of three sectors, three flows, and one injection / withdrawal. So, referring to the circular flow model, explain how Sleepyhead Estate project would increase growth in New Zealand. Sorry, the last thing we're thinking about here, because it's growth, we're talking about output. So how is it going to impact? Let's have a look at the question closer. Referring to the circular flow model above, explain how a successful Sleepyhead project would increase growth in New Zealand. Let's think about this. I'm going to start with, and this doesn't have to be the only right answer, but I'm just what I like to do, one injection, and then I want to hit households and producers. So I'm going to say investment is my injection. So 1, increase in investment. This is because. It's a good way to get some depth by using the words this is because. This is because business, the Sleepyhead business, is investing in this new town and new factory, spending lots of money on a new factory. This will be purchasing construction and all those aspects of building a new factory in a new town. Secondly, and this is where we want to get to, producers are going to increase output. Producers are going to increase output. So we're not talking about mattress output here, we're talking about construction output of goods and services like builders, plumbers, electricians, carpet layers, any technologies that go in those households, perhaps roads, infrastructure. We're going to increase output, which is nice. And then 3, we still want to talk about another 2 flows. So we're going to talk about income to households. So now households are going to have more income because businesses need more resources in order to fuel that increased output. So income is going to rise. And then 4 is going to be consumption. So with this increase in income, households spend more. Households are going to spend more money. And then we're going to flow through those things, so you can just say one sentence at a time. This happens, this is because, this happens, this is because, this happens, this is because. And then at the end, you want to link it to growth. So perhaps you say, you can say there's an increase in I. Let me get this. There's an increase in I, and there's an increase in consumption spending. So AD is increasing, therefore there's growth. Or you might say the increase in output and increase in economic activity represents economic growth. Let's move on to the next question, the final one. Compare and contrast. In fact, that's the whole page. This is the whole page here. But let's zoom in. The advantages and disadvantages of the Sleepyhead project to families, including workers in the new homes, and the impact of the project on the government revenue and expenditure. So again, we'll go through positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. So let's do advantages and disadvantages of the project. So advantage for workers is more jobs. That's a great one. More jobs, more job security, more income. Those are all positives. Negatives is that you might live where you work, which isn't always ideal, right? Your job is attached to your house. If you lose your job, you lose your house. And that can be quite negative. Positive will be affordable housing. And then negative might be that you live in a town with everyone that you work with. That could be a negative aspect as well. You don't always want to work and live with people. It doesn't create a very nice work-life balance. So there's 2 positives and 2 negatives. I'm actually only looking for 1 here. And then for the second one, impact on government revenue. For government revenue, I'm going to say increases, and there's a number of reasons why. Increased company tax, increased GST, increased income for households, so increased tax on income are 3 ways that revenues rise. Revenues let's just do increased positives, perfect. Expenditures might decrease because of things like decreased spending on on welfare payments for the unemployed, or it might increase as the government might have to provide some new services to those new regions because it's a kind of new town. They might need a new doctor, new school, new roads, new rubbish collection, anything like that. On the other side is the expenditure might decrease because jobs, again, it's like just the opposite. Expenditure might decrease because now less people are on unemployment benefit. So they need to spend less on that, on supporting those people and the economy. So a few positives, a few negatives. And again, compare and contrast, that just means talking about this is because this means, this is because this means. Hammer that in as many times as you can. And then using the words however, whereas, on the other hand, so that you can get them, you're comparing to, not just listing facts. So this is because and this means gives you some depth. And then compare and contrast using however, whereas, on the other hand, it shows that you're comparing the two, not just listing the facts. And that's the end of the paper. So 91224 economics. This year was a pretty straightforward paper and with no curveballs. We'd be really happy if we got an exam like this at the end of the year, because it's predictable. We know what's coming up, and we know what to study for, and we know what strategy we can use, like the 4 C's, or talking about the keywords in question 2, like productive capacity, limited means, choice, opportunity cost. And then in question 3, we know what we're talking about here, because we're talking about 3 sectors, 3 flows, 1 injection or withdrawal. We look forward to seeing what the exam's going to be like this year, but we'd hope it would look something like this. Any questions, you can just drop them in the comments or flick me an email. Ka kite.